everyone, it's Lori with Behavior Education at Spirit Keeper Equine Sanctuary. Join me in the following video while I work with our 2.5-year-old coastal carpet python 005 on cooperative care behaviors, building resiliency, and consent behaviors. Notice I have set up an area adjacent to 005's enclosure with a log resting on it along with a station that he's been training with for about 1.5 years. When I open his enclosure doors, I'm ignoring him and taking out his water to clean it. He immediately is interested in what I'm doing and comes towards me. However, I don't give him any specific directions and I walk away to clean his water, and he has to make his own decision about what he wants to do. He ends up choosing to voluntarily exit his enclosure and interact with the log. When I'm ready, I'm going to ask him if he's willing to interact in a training session by presenting the target to him. The behavior 005 is about to do next is a clue to me that he is open to interacting and participating in some training. Because he's moving towards a station that we have always used for training and that we have always done station and target training with. And so just the fact that he's moving over to that station and he's investigating it and he's climbing around on it tells me that he's willing to engage, basically saying yes and giving me consent to working with him this evening. The log is something that we've never trained on. It's something that he's just been allowed to climb around on when he feels like it for exercise and for his own pleasure. We've never done any training activities with the log. And so if he didn't want to participate in engagement and interaction with me, I'm going to assume that he's going to choose to remain on the log, or that he would choose to go back into his enclosure rather than hang around that station. So watch what he chooses to do once I walk over and request interaction with him. I'm going to present him with the target, and then he has the opportunity to interact with me or not. Basically, he's going to say yes or no to engaging in this target training session. Once a snake has learned behaviors like targeting and stationing, we can use these to ask our snake for consent to interact. And this means that when we cue the snake to target or station, they can choose to engage in the activity or not. And that is what I'm about to do right now. What's really interesting here is when I started moving around and presumably doing what he views as historical antecedents to a training session, he moves over to the station and waits there for something to happen. He clearly remembers an association between the target and food because he becomes really excited and strikes at the target without thinking when I first present it to him. Once he realized the striking behavior was not getting him any reinforcement, he slows down, assesses, moves towards the target, and pauses. Notice that once he's done the behavior I'm looking for, I flatten the target. And this flattening of the target from vertical to horizontal is a new cue I'm teaching him and some of the other target-trained snakes as a marker that he has accomplished the behavior I was looking for and that reinforcement is forthcoming. So I want him to hold in this position, and then I deliver the reinforcement away from the target. I want him to start moving to the target, pausing when the marker signal is given, and then change his focus to me for delivery of reinforcement. Now that we're finished with this first repetition and he's going to take a few minutes to consume his reinforcement, I go ahead and continue with his enclosure maintenance, and I walk around the environment. There's dogs in the environment. I think my husband's watching TV. there's all sorts of normal household commotion going on in the environment. And this is building resiliency in him to lots of different environmental stimuli and to changes in his environment. It's not affecting his eating at all, and it's really important for you to understand that 005 didn't go from arriving in our house to this level of relaxation instantaneously. He's been with me over a year, and we have gradually desensitized him so that he is to the point now where none of these things bother him because he's built up this level of resiliency. His level of comfort and relaxation in the midst of all this activity and around us did not happen overnight. We built him up to this gradually in very small baby steps, and those are also known as approximations. These approximations or baby steps that we took with him to get him to this comfort level occurred over almost a year and a half's time from the time he arrived with us until now. What we're going to do is use similar approximations as we continue to target and station train him, as we've done all along, both with his gradual habituation to environmental stimuli and to his current level of target and station training. Continuing to add successive approximations towards more challenging behaviors, which teach him to do more with the target, I should be able to use the target in more diverse ways down the road. For example, I will hopefully be able to remove the target from the pole and place the target within his enclosure, up on a shelf, inside a transport container, or at any greater distance away from me that I might not normally be able to reach, so that he can go to the target and then he knows to wait there and then refocus on me for delivery of his reinforcement. This could also come in very handy if he has to go to the veterinarian and station on a scale, an exam table, or on something else for diagnostic testing. I'm sure you've already noticed here that I've re-entered the environment, and I have asked him to participate in a second target training repetition. He acknowledges me, he sees the target, he starts to engage with the activity, and then he changes his mind and he tells me no. Remember that once a snake has learned behaviors like targeting and stationing, that those are ways that we can ask the snake for consent to interact. I asked 005 to participate in a second target training repetition by cueing him with the target. And if a snake does not want to interact, they're usually going to send a clear signal, which he did here by turning away. They may also leave the area or ignore the cue altogether. I remain there for a few seconds or maybe a minute just to give him the opportunity to change his mind and engage in the second target training repetition before I decide to leave the area. The goal with consent behaviors is to give the snake or any animal, including humans, some control over what happens to them by allowing them to make choices. And this reduces fear, anxiety, and distress, and it increases the snake's comfort level and amount of trust with keepers and handlers. I give him a few minutes just sort of to hang out on his station, and then I re-enter his environment, and I ask him again if he will consent to a second target training session. Snakes may use avoidance, displacement, or defensive behaviors when they're experiencing conflict or stress about a situation. And I think in this case, he wasn't necessarily stressed. He was just maybe confused and conflicted about the combinations of behaviors I'm starting to ask him for. And the new cue I'm teaching him, which is flattening the target so that he holds in position when he's done the desired behavior, and then he looks for the reinforcement away from the target. Also keep in mind that he is adjacent to his enclosure and the doors are open, so he could go back to his habitat at any time rather than participate in this activity, but he chose to give consent to participate in this target training session, which made me very happy, and he did a great job. By respecting 005's choice to tell me no, when I asked him the last time It really went a long way to establish some additional trust between us and ease any anxiety he had about trying this again. During our third targeting repetition during this training session, I am asking 005 to voluntarily shift back into his normal living habitat. At 2.5 years old, with just over 1.5 years of consistent positive reinforcement training, he has been making amazing progress with his training so far, both in targeting and stationing, as well as his resiliency training and becoming comfortable with the household environment and all of the different distractions in it. Even though he's made some great accomplishments so far, it's really important that we continue to stretch the learner so that they don't stagnate and that we keep the training challenging in order to build problem-solving skills and establish additional resiliency. We can also use additional training to open up more practical options for use of the learned behaviors that he already knows. Cooperative care training in the long run reduces fear, anxiety, and distress because the snake has a voice in what is happening. And this is really useful for smoother and safer veterinary visits, routine care, emergency situations that come up, and every other aspect of captive management. As 005 cooperatively shifts back into his normal habitat, let me tell you a little bit about him. He was hatched on April 24th, 2018, and he's been with us since February 27th, 2019. I have worked with him on target training, station training, choice-based handling, and gradual desensitization to various environmental stimuli to build resiliency since he arrived here at only 10 months old. My work with him has been with the goal of training these cooperative behaviors and consent behaviors so that he can voluntarily participate in his own care, communicate to me when he's willing to interact or not, and so that he experiences less fear, anxiety, and distress living and interacting under captive management. Hopefully, as you watched this video, you noticed voluntary shifting, stationing, consenting to engage or not in training, learning new behaviors like a marker and changing the focus to receive reinforcement, as well as the awesome behavior of him targeting back into his normal enclosure. Thank you so much for watching. Until next time, please remember to always be kind and love your animals.